All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, OBBBA Impacting Transportation Funds, Economic Analysis Using REMI-AI. This webinar is being presented by Owen Karpeles, Nigel Ma, and Teddy Sun from REMI. I'm Brian, and I'm thrilled to be the host of this presentation. At REMI, our mission is to inform public policy. We provide software that allows government and non-government decision makers to test the economic effects of their policies before they're implemented. We work in the fields of economic development, tax, transportation, energy and environment, equity, and much more. If you have any questions about REMI specifically, I encourage you to reach out to us at info@remi.com, and I would gladly connect you with the appropriate member of our team. If at any point during this presentation you have a question, there is a question box, so please ask as many as you have. And then time permitting, I'll moderate these questions to our speakers. If for some reason we're not able to get to your question, we will be sure to reach out personally. I also want to mention that shortly after this webinar finishes, a copy of the slides and a recording will be sent to you through email. So if there's anything that you missed, feel free to use that as a resource. And then finally, I want to let everyone know about a new feature of GoToWebinar that allows you to actually zoom in on the screen. So if there's anything that's too small in the presentation, you can actually just click into the slides and then zoom in and then drag it around. It should help you with anything that's hard to read. I hope you find that useful. And that's enough for me for now. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And take it away, Nigel.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for taking the time to join us on today's webinar. My name is Nigel. I'm joined by Owen and Teddy today for the presentation representing REMI. Our topic today is the recently passed One Big Beautiful Bill. We may use the reconciliation bill or the bill as abbreviation throughout this webinar, and its quantitative impact modeling on metropolitan public transit projects. The main tool we are using for this study is the REMI TranSight model suite, equipped with our freshly developed AI module. Now, let's first welcome Teddy to give us an overview of the reconciliation bill.
Thank you for the introduction, Nigel. Once again, I would like to thank you all for attending. I'd like to start with some background on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which was recently signed into law on July 4th, 2025. I'll start with an overview on what's being proposed in the Big Beautiful Bill. Starting with taxes and economy, the bill proposes cutting the corporate tax rate and reducing capital gains and estate taxes. These changes are designed to stimulate business investment by easing regulations and creating a more favorable tax environment for businesses. Next, in energy and environment, the bill eliminates tax credits for electric vehicles and renewable energy sources. It rolls back existing clean energy programs, and it seeks to expand oil and gas drilling. Moving to government and regulation, the legislation encourages faster approval for infrastructure and other projects and greater involvement in the private sector. Additionally, it reduces the regulatory authority of federal agencies like the EPA and the Department of Transportation. Finally, in national priorities and securities, the bill redirects government funding toward America First priorities. These include bolstering border control and supporting domestic production and manufacturing. The Big Beautiful Bill proposes several changes to transportation funding and priorities. One key aspect is the reallocation of funds, shifting federal investment toward infrastructure such as roads, bridges, air traffic control systems, and maritime facilities. The bill also includes changes to federal support for transit programs. It repeals authorization for the Capital Investment Grants Program, which supports large-scale transit projects. In addition, the bill reduces discretionary funding for the RAISE program, which is used to support multimodal hubs and first last-mile transit connections. Additionally, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has indicated that funding could be reduced for states that do not cooperate with federal immigration enforcement efforts, specifically with ICE. This could especially impact major cities like New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, where the Trump administration's mass deportation program has focused in. Now, I'll hand it over to Nigel to give some background on first last mile transit.
Thank you, Teddy. Connecting to the transportation side, let me begin by introducing the concept of first mile and last mile in a trip. So first mile and last mile refers to the beginning and ending segments of a person's journey, which usually is handled by smaller, more local scaled modes like plane walking, bike rides, or local transit trips that connect from the main public transit system. In transportation economics, local level transit like district light rail and metro extension that support these first mile and last mile needs connects the core public transit network from city center to previously disconnected or less connected regions that are further from the city center, thereby improving the overall accessibility and bring economic benefit. Therefore, the outline of our study is to first construct a hypothetical environment where a broad-scale policy like the bill crowds out a portion of transportation funding, leading to some of the transportation projects being canceled or delayed. Then we could use the REMI-powered tools to quantify the foregone economic benefits of not pursuing these projects. So out of all transportation projects, why are we focusing on first-mile projects specifically? So compared to large-scale projects, we believe that benefits of these smaller, more local first-mile projects often get overlooked. In reality, first-mile projects have 4 unique benefits. First, according to a 2022 research by the University of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the walking distance to the nearest transit station is a vital deciding factor of people's willingness of taking public transit. First-mile projects extend accessibility to previously less connected regions, which amplifies the networking effect of transit. Second, expanded first-mile options benefit riders with limited mobilities, such as low-income, elderly, or disabled riders. So these projects also play a role in promoting social equity. Increased public transportation ridership also improves traffic safety and reduces emissions by decreasing the number of car rides. At the same time, it brings rider fares and directly increases public revenue. For this specific presentation, we have selected 3 projects from America's 3 largest metro areas, New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. The project we selected are the Interborough Express from New York, a 14-mile light rail connecting Brooklyn with Queens, the 5.6-mile Red Line far south extension from Chicago connecting from 95th to the 130th Street, and the 6.7-mile LA East San Fernando rail connecting San Fernando with Van Nuys. The projects are picked on 2 rationales. First, they should be at least in planning or pre-construction stages to ensure information availability. But also, from a significant standpoint, we also wish to look at projects that are for the future instead of those that are already completed in the past. Second, geographically, we want them to serve the less connected neighborhoods further from the city center to isolate the already mature network benefits from urban areas. These 3 projects are solely picked for research example purposes. We are not implying that in reality they will actually get canceled or delayed by the bill, just for research purposes. So now I'll hand it to Owen to give us an overview of the tools we're using at REMI to tackle questions like these.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. So I'm going to go over sort of the model we use and the methodology behind the inputs. So for this analysis, we used REMI TranSight, which is our transportation software platform, modeling any transportation policy or infrastructure investment scenarios. This model is built off of our base PI Plus model, but it includes extra features that help better encapsulate economic changes to a transit network. These changes include, in the input side, you can specify construction and operational investment, and you can also aim to model transportation network effects such as hours, miles, and trip data for different modes of transportation. And in the results side, you can also see various indices such as labor access indices, commodity access indices, transportation cost matrix, and get more benefits captured from emission savings, fuel demand, safety, time savings, and more. So for our simulation, we used reports, research, public info, and we gathered an estimation of vehicle hours traveled and number of trips and vehicle miles traveled. We did this for vehicles, so highway usage, and for light rail, because we are modeling 3 light rail improvement projects. And what this does in the model is it creates a new speed scenario, and this speed scenario for various modes of transportation affects the economy differently in the base and the future. So how the model does this is it interacts with CSV files. We used Excel, and you basically import a baseline scenario of trip, VMT, and VHT broken out by vehicle mode. Again, we did auto and light rail for the simplicity of our demonstration, but there's many different types of modes you can break out in the model. And you import a baseline or a no build, no investment scenario, and an adjusted, which typically
typically reflects, investing in your infrastructure network. And what this does is it creates a new travel demand scenario on the input side. So this is a screenshot taken from the model. You can see new travel demand emission, amenity aspects, leisure time aspects, safety cost aspects, new operating costs for the infrastructure network, and a new cost matrix for accessibility, transportation, and commuting. So that's what it looks like on the input side for us. And now I'm going to talk more about REMI-AI, which is a new feature that we are developing. This comes into play on the output side of simulations. So when the model has REMI-AI, it's the regular model, but it adds sort of a virtual assistant. This streamlines, the report generating process. You can generate one-pagers, PowerPoints, export data, get explanations for things occurring in your model, which I'll get into. And what that looks like is following your simulation. So after you've input your variables and seen the results, you can generate reports. So you describe the report, give it as much information as possible, and you can put notes for each of your policy variables. And the report is given all based on, REMI model information. It's not pulling from the internet, so it's all secure on that front. And yeah, so it's able to generate, this is an example of the types of reports it generates, just pretty comprehensive and in-depth, explaining every result variable. And a really helpful feature, as you can see on the right side of the screen, is the Edit with AI feature. So this gives you the ability to, highlight a certain paragraph of the report, and you can maybe, if you want to know why population is increasing in a certain year, you can have the REMI-AI explain that to you. You can shorten paragraphs, expand. You can get it to give you the report in a different writing style to coincide with however your organization typically does reports. And it's all fully editable, so you can change it word by word. And then, as you can see on the right, you can export it into Word. You can export to Excel, make a quick PowerPoint. And what we've done here is generated a one-pager. So this is typically what it'll look like. This is basically just a template. Again, for the simplicity of our demonstration, we've just decided to include travel time savings, but in a more robust transit infrastructure analysis, you would have data for construction costs, the land acquisition, and output ratio. It'll incorporate TranSight's benefit cost ratio tool for project prioritization, and on the bottom, the time savings, safety benefits, and emissions benefits.
Thank you, Owen. Now let's take a look at some of the results from TranSight, starting with the economic implications of foregone output due to delayed investment in transit infrastructure. First, we used exponential extrapolation. Based on recent research and REMI's client experience, transit systems typically take about 10 to 15 years to reach full ridership capacity. This means that ridership will grow exponentially but slowly, primarily aligned with population growth between 2027 and 2040. Now, turning to the chart on the right, we see GDP value added over time in billions of 2017 dollars. By 2060, the value added to the economy from improved transit systems reaches approximately $2.8 billion in New York, $2 billion in Chicago, and $1.7 billion in Los Angeles. These trends reflect consistent positive economic contributions across the forecast period. The pattern of the curve captures the initial benefit, followed by a phase of expansion and the broader network effects as the system matures. The takeaway here is that while returns start modestly, long-term investment in transit infrastructure yields significant economic gains over time. Now we'll look at employment impact. Employment growth trends closely mirror the GDP results we saw earlier, following a J-shaped curve beginning with an initial benefit, followed by expansion, and then compounding network effects over time. By 2060, the model projects the creation of 21,000 jobs in New York and 12,000 jobs each in Chicago and Los Angeles. These are jobs that will be foregone if first last mile transit projects are delayed or not implemented. The growth patterns vary across regions due to regional specific parameters and input-output matrices in REMI's model. In New York, the assumption of higher population density leads to a slightly faster rate of job creation after 2040. However, in Los Angeles County, employment is more responsive to travel demand increases, resulting in faster job growth in the earlier phases. This shows how different economies lead to varying economic impact results in our model. Overall, the results reinforce the economic value of timely investment in transit infrastructure, not just in GDP, but also in sustained employment opportunities. This slide looks at the impact of transit investment, not just in absolute terms, but as a percentage of each region's total economy and employment, which gives us a clearer sense of relative impact. We see that Chicago stands out with a higher share of GDP added relative to its overall economy. This is largely because Chicago's economy is smaller than New York's, so even a modest absolute gains represent a larger proportional impact. By the year 2060, we estimate the following increases. New York sees a 0.15% rise in total GDP and a 0.26% increase in total employment. Chicago experiences a 0.17% GDP boost and a 0.18% more total employment. Los Angeles shows a 0.12 GDP gain and a 0.14% increase in added employment. These graphs help visualize that while larger regions like New York may have greater absolute gains, smaller economies feel the benefits more intensely on a relative basis.
Thank you, Teddy. So as an extension to our analysis on employment, we can also analyze the broader demographic effects of the shock, which includes discussions and changes in population, changes in labor force, and changes in labor force participation rate. Once again, we are focusing solely on the difference between the adjusted and the baseline case as our approach of quantifying impact. First, from the graph, we can see that the population and labor force both increase in response to a new transportation project, and the magnitude of such increase also increases over time. This trend can be explained by the theory of economic migration. When there is a new project, they bring economic benefits that make the region more attractive to external immigrants who migrate for economic purposes, like employment. As these economic migrants move in, we see increases in both population and labor force. To further capture this effect, we can compute the marginal labor force participation rate by dividing the additional labor force with the additional population. The metric tells the story of, out of everyone who moved in, what percentage goes into the labor force. We see that marginal labor force participation is initially high when the project first kicked in because economic migration happens upfront when the project is settled, and there's not much time lag to that. As time progresses, the marginal labor force participation slowly declines and eventually converges with the forecasted long-term labor force participation rate in that region as the economic migration effect diminishes. This economic migration effect will be foregone if the project is never pursued. Apart from looking at the basics, the REMI TranSight is also capable of looking at more advanced transportation-specific variables. In this study, we only selected the most relevant ones, but in the actual model, users will be able to customize and look at way more transportation-specific variables. Here, the three main variables we are looking at are the commodity axis index, which measures the change of access to goods and services by individuals, as well as access to specialized inputs for firms. The labor axis index, which measures the firm's access to labor and labor's access to the workplace. And the relative cost of production, which is a combination of the previous two that captures the change in the cost of production for the local economy on a higher level. By tracking the trends of these variables, we see that following the impact of transportation project, CAI and LAI both increased at a decreasing rate, and RCOP decreased at a decreasing rate. These effects are aligned with our expectations. When new transportation projects are built, they improve regional accessibility and mobility, which decreases the time waste and improves efficiency for both individuals and firms. This effect is the source of the rising CAI and rising LAI. The rising CAI and LAI also, in turn, collectively contributed to the decrease in RCOP. These variables change at a decreasing rate due to diminishing marginal returns. To summarize our key economic findings, we can look at a simple comparison between these three projects. On a very general standpoint, the impact of all three cities demonstrates similar trends, where the foregone benefits initially increase as a direct result of the project's construction, then slow down, and then increase again in the long run due to network effects. However, there are some minor differences between how this impact trend behaves between the three cities. For New York, we see the largest flat GDP and employment increase, the most obvious J-curve trend, and the largest increase in CAI and LAI. This can be explained by the fact that first, the New York project is itself the largest scale project. Also, New York City has the largest population density and a large transit elasticity multiplier, which is our model level parameter capturing the responsiveness of GDP and employment change actually to changes in VMT and VHT. These factors contribute to a persistent growth in the long run by amplifying the networking effect of the project. For similar reasons, we can see that Chicago has the second largest flat effect due to its project scale being second largest, and LA has the smallest flat effect. However, apart from that, we can see that LA has a slightly larger transportation elasticity multiplier, so its long-run steady-state network effect is slightly more significant than Chicago's, where the long-run GDP and employment value added in LA grows slightly faster than they do in Chicago. One last thing worth mentioning is that the input-output data and mathematical equations for all REMI models are all published online and are peer-reviewed to ensure the integrity of our calculations. This concludes our analysis part. I'll hand it over to Teddy to give us an overall conclusion of our webinar.
Thank you, Nigel. In conclusion, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act reprioritizes transportation funding away from public transit initiatives. If first last mile transit access projects are put on hold or canceled, many people remain disconnected from the city, leading to potential foregone GDP, employment, demographic, and travel efficiency benefits. These foregone benefits and the overall transportation effects are different in each city due to their different regional input-output configurations. REMI aims to quantify the impact of these policy changes, as well as inform stakeholders and industry leaders on how different policy changes benefit or harm their communities on both a regional and macroeconomic level. Thank you all for attending the webinar, and I'll pass it back over to Brian for any questions that you all have.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Owen, Nigel, and Teddy for the great presentation. And thank you to all who joined for the webinar. We'll shortly be getting into the question and answer portion of the presentation. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to enter those into the question box. And now we have plenty of time, so we should be able to get to everything. Also, just another reminder that in about an hour, you will be receiving the slides and a recording from this webinar. So definitely, if you have any questions once you have had a chance to review those materials, please reach out to us through any of the emails here or the info@remi.com address, and we'll be sure to get in touch and connect you to the right people. All right, great. And now we did receive some questions, so we will begin with them now. The first one being, TranSight appears to be a useful tool for evaluating transportation policy in urban city centers. Does anyone use it for rural and suburban transportation policy or projects?
I could take this one. Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, while we chose to focus on urban centers and their light rail infrastructure, TranSight has the capabilities to model a variety of transit projects, road widenings, highway, lane extensions, basically anything that involves, vehicles moving in a transportation network. TranSight can capture.
Awesome. Thank you, Owen. And we actually just received a question after that one, semi-related. Is there any evidence that these programs would benefit more rural areas? Did you model this, or could you model this?
Didn't look at the benefits that could be captured by more rural areas. We were more looking at areas right outside of a city center, but that's definitely an interesting point if we were going to continue this analysis, and I'd be interested to see what we can come up with.
Excellent, thank you. Another question we received is, what are the reasons for the differences in the graphical trends between the three cities modeled, considering that they are all comparable light rail improvement projects?
Yeah, I can take this one. Thank you for the question. I think there are a couple of reasons why that might be different among the three cities. I think the first reason is that these three projects inherently they have different project scale and their project size is different. So for the New York project, we have a 14-mile light rail. For Chicago, we have a 5.6, 5.7 mile, and for LA, we have a 6-mile project. So like the size of the project is different, so their initial shock to the economy would also be different. The second reason is that it's just that in our REMI model, we incorporated the input-output relations in 3 different cities in a way that we captures how different sectors interact with each other. So on the matrix level, on the mathematical level, that could explain differences in model outputs. And as I just mentioned, the transportation elasticity multiplier in these 3 cities are also different. We calculated that multiplier based on the regional data, but that could also contribute to why the graphical trends are different. We would love to find projects that are initially, equal in size, but as we have mentioned, we hope that this webinar focuses on projects that are like connecting to, neighborhoods that are like less urban center proximity, and also we want the projects to be more forward-looking. So when we want to fulfill these 2 criteria, there isn't like that many projects that are 100% comparable. But in the future, if there's like projects that are like 100% comparable, I'm pretty sure that the REMI model will continue to produce robust results. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Nigel. Another question we received is, are these first mile projects typically more expensive on a per passenger basis?
Thank you for the question. I think if I understand your expensive correctly, I think you're referring to the initial input costs that are used to build these projects. And if that's the case, then in our webinar here, what we did is we focused on the travel demand savings aspect of the project. So in other words, we're looking at like scoping out to like from now on to 2060, what is the long run economic benefit that the projects can bring on a network benefit and on a more like economic amplifying standpoint. What you have mentioned is more embedded in the cost and benefit analysis in like usual like infrastructure projects. So I mean, the REMI TranSight project, the REMI TranSight model is totally capable of running a cost and benefit analysis. It's just that in our presentation today, we didn't incorporate it. But it will be a very good, it'll also be a very good follow-up project idea.
Thank you, Nigel. Another question we've received is it possible to use this TranSight software to include both travel demand scenarios and other policy variables, for example, another policy in the bill?
Yeah, I can take this one. Yeah, so like I said, TranSight, you can think of it as more of like an addition to the base models. So it would be entirely possible if you wanted to do an analysis on everything that the bill focuses on, not just the reinvestment of transportation funding. You can combine travel demand data with any other policy variables that could focus on other topics that the bill covers.
Thank you, Owen. Another question received is, how much of the impacts are the result of decreased construction funding?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the construction cost part is not incorporated in our study this time because we focused on like the long run effect and the network effect, where we look at the VMT and the VHT. We try to analyze how these projects influence the economy on a time savings and amenity standpoint. But we are as I also mentioned, the REMI TranSight model is capable of handling these types of analysis. We could input a potential transportation construction cost, and the REMI model will incorporate that effect and produce another round of results. So if you're interested, you're welcome to contact info@remi.com, and we can maybe have a follow-up conversation about this, about everything that's transportation cost, construction cost related. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, also adding on that, from our REMI one-pager template, there was an area where you could input capital expenditures. So if you were interested in seeing what the results would be in a larger transportation project, you can definitely input those into the model and see the results, and also have the AI generate a report including those results.
Thank you, Nigel and Teddy. Another question was, how does your model consider non-monetary variables of transportation infrastructure investment, such as safety and environmental or emissions benefits?
Yeah, that's a great question. So many governments have relevant guidelines that where they assign monetary values to these like amenity costs that we have in our model, like statistical life conversions. But we also have equations within the REMI model to convert non-monetary variables into monetary terms, and those are included in the complete analysis that we run.
All right, thank you so much, Teddy. Those are all the questions we received at this time, so I will begin concluding. But again, feel free if anything comes up later or once you get a closer look at the slides again or the recording, do reach out to us at the email addresses here. We'd love to continue the conversation. So thank you so much, everybody. We hope you will attend more of our webinars, and we hope you have a great day and a great rest of your week. Bye, everyone.